The DNA results said he was the father. The problem was he had never touched her. Not like that. Not once. Not even close. And yet there it was. Printed on a clinical white sheet of paper, black ink, no ambiguity, no room for misreading. The kind of document that does not care about your version of events. The kind that just tells you what is true and leaves you to fall apart at whatever pace you can manage. Kwon Seokhyun stood in the hallway of Seoul National University Hospital, in the same charcoal coat he had worn to 3 board meetings that week, holding a piece of paper that had just quietly detonated his entire understanding of the last 4 years of his life. Down the hall, behind a closed door, Nyla James was sitting beside her daughter's hospital bed, holding a small hand, talking softly about nothing important because that is what you do when your child has just had emergency surgery and all you have left to offer is your voice. He had known Nyla for 6 years. He had loved her for 5 of those 6. He had spent the other one pretending he did not. And now he was standing in a hospital corridor holding proof that the child he had helped raise, the child he had driven to school and stayed up with during fevers and quietly, privately considered his in every way that mattered, was actually, biologically, impossibly his. He had never slept with Nyla James. At least, not that he remembered. Let us go back. Because this story starts before the hospital, before the DNA, before everything. It starts on a rainy Thursday evening in Mapogu, in a small but very well-organized apartment that smelled like shea butter and whatever Nyla was cooking, and it starts with a phone call. She called you. Seokhyun's best friend and business partner Lim Juno said, leaning against the kitchen counter in Seokhyun's penthouse with a glass of whiskey. He had helped himself to without asking because that was simply who Juno was. She did not call me, Seokhyun said. She texted. What did she say? Seokhyun held out his phone. Juno read the text. Twice. Then he looked up slowly. She is asking you to help her raise a baby. She is asking if I would be willing to be involved. There is a difference. The baby is not yours. I know that. The baby belonged to her dead husband. I know that too. Her husband who, may I remind you, she married 6 months after you and she ended things. Juno. Her husband who she married extremely quickly and who died extremely suddenly and who she was, by all accounts, extremely devoted to, which means. Juno. Which means you spent 2 years watching her be happy with someone else and then the man died and now she is texting you at 10 at night asking for help. Seokhyun took his phone back. Are you going to say anything useful or is this the whole thing? Juno thought about it. What are you going to say? I am going to say yes. Juno looked at him for a long moment. Of course you are, he said and took another sip of his whiskey. That was how it started. Nyla James was not someone who asked for help easily. That is important to understand about her. She was 30 years old, Nigerian-American, had been living in Seoul for 4 years on a graphic design career that she had built from a single freelance client and stubborn talent. She had a studio space in Hongdae. She had a client list that other designers would have negotiated organs for. She had walls up that had been constructed slowly and carefully and reinforced at regular intervals, because life had not always been generous, and she had learned early that the safest person to depend on was yourself. Asking Kwon Seokhyun for help was, by her own private accounting, one of the top 3 most difficult things she had ever done. He was her ex. Not a terrible ex. Not a man who had done something unforgivable. Just a man she had walked away from because she had not been ready, and who she had watched from a careful distance while she built a life that had somehow still developed a Seokhyun-shaped gap in the middle of it. She had married Daniel. Daniel Park, kind and funny and present in the way Seokhyun sometimes was not, and she had loved him genuinely. She had been 7 months pregnant when Daniel died. A car accident on a Wednesday on a road he had driven 100 times before. Fast and stupid and completely without warning the way the worst things always are. And then she was alone 2 months from giving birth, in a city that was not her hometown, with a grief that had no bottom. She had texted Seokhyun because she was out of options and also if she was honest with herself, which she tried to be on alternate Tuesdays, because some part of her had always known that when things became truly impossible he was the person she would turn to. He showed up 2 days later at her apartment with a bag of groceries and a very neutral expression and said, "What do you need?" She looked at him standing in her doorway. This man she had let go. This infuriating, controlled, occasionally devastating man. And she said, "I need someone who will not treat me like I am about to break." He put the groceries on the counter. "I can do that," he said. And he did. Her daughter was born on a Tuesday morning in April. 3.2 kilograms, excellent lungs, immediate strong opinions about everything, which Nyla said was exactly what she expected. Seokhyun was in the waiting room. He had not planned to be there. He had driven Nyla to the hospital at 2 in the morning when the contractions started, which he had also not planned for but had been quietly prepared for because that was the kind of man he was. He had intended to drop her off and leave. Instead he sat in a waiting room chair for 6 hours, drinking terrible coffee and responding to business emails and pretending this was all very calm and reasonable. When the nurse came to tell him the baby had arrived, he stood up so fast he knocked the coffee over. Nyla named her daughter Era. Park Era. Daniel's surname. Seokhyun held her for approximately 4 minutes in the hospital room and she grabbed his finger with both hands and he looked at the ceiling for a moment and then looked back down at her and said absolutely nothing. She likes you, Nyla said from the bed. She is 4 minutes old. She likes anything warm. I know my daughter, Nyla said. She likes you. He looked at this small person in his arms. He thought about the fact that she was not his. That he had no claim here. That any sensible version of himself would have handed her back, nodded professionally and found a clean exit. He was not being sensible. She is very small, he said. All babies are small, Seokhyun. I know that. Do you? Because you look surprised. I am not surprised. I am. He paused. She is very small. Nyla watched him holding her daughter and said nothing. But something in her face moved that she did not entirely manage to put away before he looked up and caught it. Neither of them said anything about it. But it was there. The arrangement was not formal. It did not have a name. Seokhyun came by when he was not buried in work, which in the beginning was 3 times a week and then somehow became 5. He drove Nyla to the pediatrician. He assembled the crib, badly at first and then correctly after Nyla pointed out that the instructions were illustrated and he had ignored the illustrations. He learned Era's schedule. He watched Nyla work at the kitchen table while Era slept and he answered emails from the other end of the table and they did not talk about what this was. Juno came by once, looked at the scene, said, and left. He did not elaborate on the but it contained multitudes. There were moments that were harder to ignore than others. The evening Seokhyun stayed too late and fell asleep on Nyla's couch and woke up at 2 in the morning to find her standing over him with a blanket, about to put it over him before he opened his eyes, and she pretended she had been walking past and happened to be holding a blanket. The morning Era would not stop crying and Nyla was running on 4 hours of sleep and Seokhyun took the baby and walked laps around the apartment talking to her quietly until she stopped. And Nyla watched from the doorway and pressed her hand flat against the wall to give herself something to hold on to. There was the night Nyla said out of nowhere, "You did not have to do any of this." "I know," he said. "Why did you?" He looked at her across the table. "Because you asked me to." "That is not an answer. It is the only one I have right now." She looked at him for a long moment. The kitchen was quiet. Era was asleep. The city hummed outside. "Okay," she said finally. And they went back to their separate tasks and did not say anything else, and the moment passed. But it did not leave. It just moved somewhere quieter and stayed there. If you are watching this right now, we want to pause for just a second and ask, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments right now. Seriously, we love seeing our community from every corner of the globe. And while you are at it, if you have not subscribed to Unscriptedkay yet, tap that button right now. You're already here. Make it official. You are going to want to be around for what happens next. Era grew. This is what children do, and it is always faster than anyone is prepared for. She grew and she became a person with preferences and opinions and a laugh that came from somewhere deep and unexpected. She called Seokhyun Appa for the first time when she was 2 years old, calmly, like it was not a grenade, like she had simply been waiting until she was certain enough of the word to use it. Nyla froze. Seokhyun went very still. Era looked between them with the complete serenity of a child who has just said an obvious thing and cannot understand why the adults have stopped functioning. "Appa," she said again, pointing directly at Seokhyun. "Era," Nyla said carefully. "Baby, that is." "It is okay," Seokhyun said quietly. "Seokhyun." "It is okay," he said again. She looked at him. He was looking at Era. Something on his face that he was not even trying to hide. Something that had been building for 2 years behind a professional, measured expression, finally finding a crack to come through. Nyla looked away. Her throat moved. Later that night, after Era was in bed, she said to him, "You know you do not have to do this. I never wanted you to feel obligated." "I do not feel obligated," he said. "She is not yours." "I know. Biologically she is. I know whose biology she carries, Nyla." He looked at her. "That has not changed anything for me. Not once. Not for a single day." She opened her mouth. Then she closed it. "Go to sleep," he said. "You have a deadline tomorrow." She went. But she lay awake for a very long time. Because here is the thing about a wall. You can maintain it. You can check it every morning and reinforce every crack and tell yourself it is holding. But you cannot stop it from being worn down slowly, steadily from the outside, by a man who keeps showing up every single day with groceries and patience and the kind of quiet devotion that does not announce itself. Nyla James's wall was not holding. She knew it. She just needed more time before she knew what to do with knowing it. Here is where it gets complicated. Era was 4 years old when she got sick. Not the ordinary kind. The kind that moves fast and does not apologize for it. She was fine on a Monday and running a temperature on Tuesday and in the pediatric ICU by Thursday morning with a condition that required immediate intervention and a lot of information very quickly. The doctor was calm and direct. He said the treatment had a very high success rate. He said they needed blood type confirmation and standard pre-procedure panels. He said it was routine. It was not routine. The blood typing came back first. Then the broader panel. Then the genetics portion that nobody had asked for specifically but that the thoroughness of the hospital's protocol produced automatically, flagging an anomaly that the doctor brought to Seokhyun quietly in the hallway while Nyla was inside with Era. "Are you the child's father?" the doctor asked. "No," Seokhyun said. "I am a family friend." The doctor looked at the paper in his hand. Then at Seokhyun. "I think you may want to reconsider that answer." Seokhyun took the paper. He read it. He read it again. And then he stood in that hallway in his charcoal coat and held a piece of paper that said he was the biological father of a child he had never conceived, with a woman he had never slept with, and he stood there trying to be the kind of man who does not simply dissolve in a hospital corridor because that is not what this moment needed. He needed facts. He needed information. He needed to understand what had actually happened because one of two things was true and both of them were impossible. Either the science was wrong or something had happened that he did not know about. Something Nyla had not told him. Something that had been sitting in the dark for 5 years, waiting for a blood panel to bring it into the light. He folded the paper. Put it in his pocket. Walked back into Era's room. Nyla looked up when he entered. Her eyes were red. She had been crying quietly, the kind of crying you do when you are trying to keep your face together for a child. "She is going to be okay," Nyla said immediately, reading his expression wrong. The doctor said. "I know," he said. "I spoke to him." "Okay." She turned back to Era. "She was asking for you. She wanted to know where Appa was." He crossed the room and sat on the other side of the bed and took Era's hand and said, "I am here," in a voice that was very steady for a man holding a secret that had just changed the shape of everything. He said nothing to Nyla that day. Era's procedure went smoothly. The doctor was right about the success rate. By the weekend she was arguing about which cartoon she wanted to watch, which Nyla said was the clearest possible sign that she was going to be completely fine. Seokhyun went home on Saturday evening and sat in his apartment with the folded paper on the coffee table and called Juno. "I need you to find something," he said. "Hello to you too," Juno said. "Find what?" "Daniel Park's medical history." Pause. "Specifically his fertility records." Silence. "Seokhyun. I will explain when you have the information." Juno was quiet for a moment. "How urgent?" "Yesterday," Seokhyun said. Juno called back 48 hours later. His voice was careful in the way it only got when the information he was carrying was something he did not want to be carrying. "Daniel Park," Juno said, "was diagnosed with severe azoospermia at 26 years old. Complete absence of sperm. He had consulted 3 specialists. The diagnosis was confirmed each time." Pause. "Seokhyun. He could not have fathered a child. Biologically it was not possible." Seokhyun sat with that for a long time. "There is something else," Juno said. "Tell me." "I found a record of a private fertility procedure. An IVF consultation, not under Nyla's name but connected to the address of Daniel Park's home." 14 months before Era was born. Juno exhaled. Seokhyun, someone donated genetic material. And whoever approved that file had access to Seokhyun Holdings' private medical database. The silence on the line was very long. Who had access to that database? Seokhyun said. Juno did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet. At the time, 3 people. Me. And your brother. Kwon Seojun. Younger by 4 years, charming in the way people are charming when they are not entirely trustworthy. And the only person in Seokhyun's life who had ever looked at Nyla James like she was a problem he wanted to solve. Seokhyun put the phone down. He sat in his apartment for a very long time. Then he picked up his keys. Because there was only one conversation that mattered now, and it needed to happen before anything else. Nyla opened the door in her studio clothes, charcoal smudges on one hand, Era on her hip, looking entirely recovered and already pointing past Seokhyun at something in the corridor that she found more interesting. Dinosaur, Era announced. That is a mop, baby, Nyla said. Then she looked at Seokhyun's face and something shifted in hers. What happened? Can I come in? She stepped aside. He waited until Era was set up with her tablet and her headphones and a snack that would hold her attention for exactly as long as this conversation needed. Then he sat at the kitchen table, the table they had shared 10,000 times, and he took the folded paper out of his pocket and placed it flat in front of her. She looked at it. Then at him. What is this? It came from the hospital. Part of Era's panel. He picked it up. She read it. Seokhyun watched her face. The color did not drain from it so much as rearrange itself. Her expression moved through several things very quickly. Confusion. Then something that was not quite confusion. Then something that looked to a man who had spent 5 years learning her face like recognition. She knew something. Nyla, he said. His voice was even. Completely even. I need you to tell me what you know. She put the paper down. She looked at the table. Her hands were flat on the surface still. Daniel could not have children, she said. It came out quiet. Factual. Like something she had carried for years, and finally here it was possible to set it down. We found out after we were married. He was devastated. We looked into options. Someone told us about a donor program, very private, very discreet. We were told the donor was anonymous. We were told there would be no way to trace it. She paused. Daniel wanted a child so badly. I wanted to give him that. So I agreed. Who arranged the program? Seokhyun said. She was quiet. Nyla. A man named Kwon, she said. He told us his name was Kwon Minsu. He said he ran a private medical coordination service. He knew Daniel from somewhere. He approached us. She finally looked up. I did not know he was your brother. I did not know until about a year after Era was born, when I saw a photo of your family at an event and I recognized his face. Her voice was steady but barely. By then Daniel was gone. And I did not know how to tell you. I did not know what it meant. I did not know if it was a coincidence or if he had. She stopped. He used my medical file, Seokhyun said. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. She pressed her hand to her mouth. He accessed a database he was not authorized to use, took my genetic information, and arranged for it to be used in a procedure that neither you nor I agreed to. He said it flatly. Like reading a report. Because if he used any other register right now, he was not sure what would come out of him. You did not know it was mine. I swear to you, she said. I swear. I thought it was anonymous. I would never. Her voice broke slightly. Seokhyun, I would never have kept that from you. If I had known. I know, he said. You believe me? He looked at her. 5 years of this woman. Every version of her he had been given access to. The one who asked for help she did not know how to ask for. The one who watched him hold her daughter and pressed her hand flat against the wall. The one who lay awake at night and thought about something she would not say out loud. Yes, he said. I believe you. She exhaled, and it sounded like something that had been held for a very long time finally being released. They sat in silence for a moment. What happens now? She asked. He looked at the paper on the table. Then he looked at the living room where Era was watching something with her headphones on, completely unbothered, occasionally dancing slightly to whatever she was listening to. Nothing changes for Era, he said. She does not need to know any of this right now. She is 4. What she needs is exactly what she already has. And your brother? Pause. I will handle Seokhyun. Nyla nodded. Then, what happens with us? The kitchen was very quiet. What do you want to happen? He said. She looked at him. No wall. No careful distance. Just Nyla James, charcoal on her hands and 5 years of something she had not let herself say, looking at the man who had shown up every single time and asking what she always privately knew would eventually have to be asked. I think you already know, she said. I would like to hear it, he said. If you do not mind. She looked at the ceiling. Then back at him. You are infuriating. I have been told. You are controlled and you are occasionally impossible to read and you once reorganized my kitchen without asking and I have never fully forgiven you for that. The system was inefficient. It was my system. Pause. And you have been the most steady thing in my life for 5 years and I have been pretending not to notice because I was afraid of needing you and then losing you again. She said it all in one breath, quickly, like if she slowed down she would lose her nerve. That is what I want to say. That is what happens with us. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I never stopped. Never stopped what? Loving you, he said. Simply. The way you say something you have been thinking for a long time and have finally found the right moment for. Not when you left. Not when you married Daniel. Not when you called me at 10 at night and asked me to show up. I never stopped. I just waited until you were ready. She looked at him. That is possibly the most patient and also most quietly stubborn thing I have ever heard. I am a patient man. You are a ridiculous man. Also possible. She stood up. He stood up. They were on the same side of the table now, which had not happened by accident, and neither of them was pretending it had. She looked up at him. He looked down at her. Your kitchen organization was terrible, she said. The original system made no sense, he said. I knew where everything was. So did I. After I fixed it. She laughed. The real kind. The kind she had not quite managed to fully release in 5 years of keeping things careful. And he put his hand against the side of her face the way you touch something you have been afraid to touch and finally have permission for, and she leaned into it slightly before catching herself, and he noticed her catching herself and he said, You do not have to stop. She did not stop. He handled Seokhyun. This is not a story that lingers on that conversation because it does not need to. What matters is that it happened, that Seokhyun arrived at his brother's apartment and closed the door and was very, very quiet for a very long time before he said anything, and that Seokhyun, who had spent 4 years watching his brother quietly care for a child and a woman that he himself had engineered into Seokhyun's orbit, had the precise expression of a man who had always known this moment was coming. You wanted me to be her father, Seokhyun said. Seokhyun did not deny it. You thought if you created it, it would happen naturally. I thought you would never do it yourself, Seokhyun said. You loved her for years and you did nothing. You were going to let her go again and do nothing. I made a decision. You made a decision with my life, Seokhyun said. Without asking. Without consent. Do you understand what you took from her? From me. The ability to choose. Seokhyun was quiet. You will fix what can be fixed. Legally, every document, every record. You will apologize to Nyla properly on her terms, when she decides she wants to hear it. He paused at the door. And you will understand that what you did was not love. Not for me. Not for her. It was control. And that is the one thing I will not tolerate from anyone. He left. Juno called that evening. How did it go? He will cooperate. And nothing. It is handled. Pause. Seokhyun. How are you? Seokhyun looked out at Seoul from his apartment window. The city lit up the way it always did, indifferent and luminous and completely unbothered by anyone's personal revelations. I am going to Nyla's in the morning, he said. Juno was quiet for a moment. Then, take breakfast. I was already going to take breakfast. Of course you were, Juno said. Good night. He took breakfast. Nyla opened the door, looked at the bag, looked at him and said, It is 7:30 in the morning. I know what time it is. I have a deadline. I know that too. She stared at him. He stared back. You organized my shoes, she said. He looked past her at the entrance. He had reorganized the shoe rack the previous week and said nothing about it. Seokhyun. They were not ordered by frequency of use. I am going to lose my mind, she said and stepped aside to let him in. Era came barreling down the hallway in her pajamas, slid on the wooden floor in her socks, caught herself on the wall, and pointed at the bag in Seokhyun's hand. Is there kimbap? There is kimbap, he said. I love you, she told him with complete sincerity and took the bag to the kitchen. Nyla watched this. The way she always watched the two of them with that expression she had stopped trying to hide. She is going to be devastated when she is older and finds out you two share DNA, Nyla said. She already thinks you hung the moon. She is going to be completely unbearable about it. She is already unbearable about it. True. He crossed the entrance. He did not move away. They were close in the way they had been close the night before, which was a new proximity, one that had been established and had not been taken back. I spoke to Seokhyun, he said. Okay. He will apologize when you are ready. On your terms. There is no timeline. She nodded. And I want to be clear about something, he said. What Seokhyun did was wrong. The means were wrong. The lack of consent was wrong. But the outcome, he paused. Air is here. And whatever the circumstances were, I would not change that. Not for anything. Nyla looked at him. You are going to make me emotional at 7:30 in the morning. The kimbap will help. Nothing helps at 7:30 in the morning. He almost smiled. She caught the almost smile and pointed at it. There. That is what I am talking about. You think you are hiding that, but you are not. I am not hiding anything. You are the most hidden man I have ever met, and you are standing in my hallway being hidden right now. I told you I loved you last night, he said. You said it very calmly. I am a calm person. Seokhyun. She looked at him. Normal people are nervous when they say that. I was not nervous, he said. I have known for a long time. There was nothing to be nervous about. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, I genuinely cannot tell if that is the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me or the most arrogant. Both, Era said from the kitchen without looking up from her kimbap. They looked at each other. They both started laughing. The apartment was loud with it. The kind of laugh that fills a space and does not apologize. Era, unbothered, continued her kimbap with the focused energy of a child who had weighed in and considered the matter settled. Maybe it was. Here is what happened after. What happened after was not a grand gesture or a dramatic declaration. It was smaller than that and far more true. It was Seokhyun at the table every morning that year, the same table, same coffee, learning the new version of normal. Nyla finishing a pitch while he answered emails, and Era drew things on his important documents, which he permitted because she was 4 and also because he secretly kept every single one. It was Nyla calling him from a gallery opening 3 months later, whispering into the phone. A client just offered me a contract that would double my studio capacity, and I am standing in the bathroom because I needed to tell you before anyone else. It was him saying, take it, without a pause, without conditions. It was her saying, I know, and meaning everything by that. Juno threw a small dinner when Seokhyun and Nyla finally, officially, named what they were, and he gave a speech that lasted 11 minutes and contained more feelings than Seokhyun had previously been aware Juno possessed. He cried twice. He denied it. The evidence was very clear. Era called Seokhyun Appa without ceremony or announcement, the way she always had, because she had decided that at 2 years old and had seen no reason to revise her position. When she was old enough, they would tell her the full truth. All of it. Gently, honestly, in a way that gave her the story without making her carry it. They would tell her, this is where you came from. And also, this is how you were loved, and those are two different things and both of them matter, and neither of them is more true than the other. Because here is what this story is really about. Family is not only what biology produces. Biology is the starting point, and sometimes it is the whole story, but sometimes it is just the opening sentence of something much longer and much more chosen. The man who shows up every day, who learns the schedule and loses sleep over the fever and quietly reorganizes the shoe rack even when no one asked him to, that man is a father. Regardless of what any document says. He was a father before the hospital proved it. The hospital just caught up. And love, real love, is not the kind that arrives already certain of itself. It is the kind that comes back repeatedly, patiently, with groceries and kimbap and reorganized kitchens, until the person on the other side of the wall finally trusts that the knocking is not going to stop. Nyla James had built her wall carefully, brick by brick, over years for very good reasons. And Park Seokhyun had never once tried to knock it down. He had just stood on the other side of it consistently until she opened the door herself. That is how you earn someone. Not by dismantling their defenses. By making them feel safe enough to lower those defenses on their own. Some lessons arrive through joy. Some arrive through loss. Some arrive through a DNA result in a hospital hallway that makes no sense until it makes every sense. But they arrive. And if you are paying attention and if you are brave enough to sit with the truth once it finds you, they change you for the better every time. Subscribe to Unscriptedkay right now. This is the kind of storytelling we show up for every week, the kind that keeps you up at night thinking, the kind you send to the person who needs to hear it. Tap the button, join our community and stay close. Because the next story is already coming. And you are not going to want to miss it.